On this episode of Carnage, we're going to put the trans and converter back in Dad's ute. Last time we visited Dad's ute, we took the trans out, did a shift kit, sent the converter off to TCE, and now it is back painted in their trademark green. So they've raised the stall speed in that pretty much as far as we can go in that converter size while retaining the lock-up converter function. Yeah, wanted to keep that for street drivability. Remember, this isn't really a drag car. We're making it go fast on the quarter mile, but without sacrificing its actually cruisability down the highway. So we'll get that into this and get it into the car shortly. In the meantime, I've done some other things. I changed the valve springs in the engine, which I did off camera because I just needed to get shit done, really. So got a special tool from Comp Cams and VPW that allows me to change the valve springs on the engine, so I did that. I have also modified the rear end. Let's have a look at that. So if you remember our Mopar Sunday trip, I put these very large, very tall rear tyres on the rear of the ute, and it gave it a very bum up stance. Wasn't too bad at the drags where we switched to drag radials, but out on the road, it sat very bum up with these very tall, I think they're like 28-inch tall tyres. Good on the highway and seemed to drive nice, which was fantastic, but just sat very bum up. So I thought, let's lower the rear end down a bit so it sits a little bit more level. And what I've done to do that is replace the front hangers with these adjustable hangers from Elco's, and it allowed me to get 2 inches of drop without actually having to do anything else. Just replacing these front hangers, dropped it 2 inches, and if I need more, then I can put lowering blocks in it as well. But just the hangers themselves, 2 inches of drop, beautiful. So as you can see, fitting those adjustable spring hangers has tucked the tyres up into the wheel well a lot more. It doesn't cause any dramas with rubbing or anything like that. It sits nice and level, so win-win, I reckon. All right, let's send it back up again and get this transmission in. Okay, so I've lubed up the neck of the converter with a little bit of tranny fluid. We'll get her on there. This is always the fun part. Pump alignment and all that. They either go straight in or take ages. This one's going to take ages. We are pretty close there, I think. All right, let's try and get some bolts in this thing. Get a bolt started. So uncomfortable. Use the force, Luke. Okay, so we've got our tail shaft in, the box is in. Pretty much all the big bolts are done. Now it's just lines, kick down cable, starter motor back in, converter bolts, little stuff like that. So we'll do that in the morning. Then hopefully we'll get to take this for a drive. But now it's knock-off time. I'm going home. Right, so morning again. We've just got to do our final hookup, get the starter back in, trans lines, exhaust hooked up, all that good stuff. Yeah, get this thing sorted so we can go out and give it a test drive. Let's do it. Now that the TC converter's in, the box is in, everything's done up, we've run the lines, you didn't really need to see all that. Rest assured, it is all bolted up and ready to go. Although we have to do the ignition system, we've got to put down the rocker covers properly because, you know, I've had to unseal them when I did the valve springs before. Actually, let's talk about that stuff. So, for those that want to know, I put in a Comp Cams 972. They're the springs I used. And I just used this little Comp Cams tool, which basically bolts into where the shaft mounts. And then you just use a little tool like this, lever it down, replace each spring individually. So a handy little tool. So that is done, but now we also have our ignition system to do. So we've got new Dizzy, new leads, new coil, new ignition box, all from ProFlow, all ready to go in. So we'll just get that into the car, get this thing fired up. What else have we got? I've also got a new thermostat housing because this one just continues to leak. It does not stop leaking. Drives me nuts. I think I paid, what, 50 bucks, 70 bucks for that thermostat housing? It still leaks. And we've got a proper Mopar Dizzy hold down clamp so I can stop using that Chevy one that doesn't fit properly. Anyway, a little bit to do there. Let's just get it done. So while I've been spinning the engine around doing converter bolts and all that sort of stuff, I've been sort of keeping an eye on making sure it's on top dead center of the compression stroke. I'll just confirm that I am up there by sticking my finger over the spark plug hole and winding it over to top dead center. It builds pressure against my finger. I know I've got the right hole, but I'm just trying to get my finger in the hole. I can't get a good seal against my finger at the moment. Yeah, it's definitely that one. All right, I'll just get the top dead center or thereabouts. Line it up. Okay, so that's about right. Top dead center, number one. Now we can just drop the Dizzy in and that part will be right to go. And then we just need to hook up the rest of the ignition system. So here is our billet dizzy. Pull it out of the packet. So some fittings and stuff in there. So there you have it. Just got a magnetic pickup inside. No control electronics in there, as you can see. Just a distributor cap and a pickup. So we shall, slot that in, bolt it down, and we're really good to go as far as that's concerned. All right, so that will be our number one. Like a glove. Okay, we'll use their coil to suit their ignition system. So we have the dizzy in, we have the coil in, and now it's time for our ignition control box, and that's how you wire it. That way. So the hookup of the ignition module is pretty simple, as I showed before. The wiring diagram's just on the back. It has a built-in rev limiter, so adjustable to whatever you want, up to 9,500. I don't think we're going there, so let's go about 7.5. Sounds about right. Maybe a little bit lower, 7.2. Let's go there. There are also, you can use these on 4, 6 or 8 cylinders. If it's an 8 cylinder, you don't need to do anything. If it's a 4 or 6 cylinder, you have to uncap this little cap, and there's wires in there you've got to cut for to switch it to 6 or 4 cylinder mode. So 8 cylinder, you don't have to do anything at all. We're going to mount it inside the cab. Obviously there's going to be a bit involved in that, and then run the wiring through the firewall, you know, to the battery, to the coil, to the dizzy. All the wiring's there. Pretty easy to do, just time consuming. Okay, so what I'm doing here is running 2 leads. These will be our power leads for our ignition box, which I've got sitting on the carpet under the dash at the moment. To mount the box properly, I need to do the old trick of pulling the seat out. To do that, I can't be on the hoist, so I haven't got room to move cars in and out at the moment because it's raining outside. Melbourne things. So what I'm going to do is run these wires to our battery, which is where they're supposed to run. Already got the wires running to the coil, already got the wires running to the dizzy. So we'll push these through, plug them in to our ignition box, and then we'll hook it up to the battery, and then run some leads, and then we'll be able to fire it up. That'll be awesome. So now we're up to our spark plug leads, which we need to terminate. Oh, that's interesting. Got like a ceramic surround on them to keep the heat out of them. It's kind of cool. So ProFlow leads. 8 of them, of course, for our V8 engine. So obviously needing to terminate as well. So we've got boots and plugs and everything there. We've got our special crimpers. Let's get to work. So the ProFlow kit comes with two types of connectors. You got these gold ones, which are for the ones that are like buried down in the cap, and then we got these silver ones, which are more for the clip-on style, the cap that we've got, which have the posts sticking up. So we'll use these. All right, we'll grab our first one and pretty much terminate it there. Seven more to go. All right, so I'm going to put the battery cables on now. I've done the leads, done the plug separators, the wire separators, sorry. And yeah, we'll hook up the timing light and then we'll hit the key for the very first time. And as per usual, we have not done any testing. We have not tried to fire it up at all. This will be genuinely its first start. Let's see if we got this right. Okay, here we go. Not sure it's got fuel up there at the moment. No. So she don't start, and it's one of two things. Either I've wired it up wrong or I've got the dizzy 180 degrees out. I just checked the wiring. I'm pretty confident I've got it wired up right. I was pretty confident I had the dizzy in right. However, you know, with all the installation of the flex plate and the converter and all that sort of stuff, it could be that I've got the dizzy 180 degrees out. So what I'm going to do is crank it over by hand. I've got a compression gauge on the number one cylinder, and we'll wind it up onto top dead center, and if I'm seeing, you know, compression on that, that'll be our firing stroke, and then we'll see if the dizzy lines up. If it doesn't, then I've got it 180 degrees out and we shall reset it. Anyway, let's lift it up so I can do this. I've got the compression gauge just up there so I can see when it wants to start to move, and we'll just wind it over. The needle's starting to move. All right, so I guess that is our compression. All right, so that's close to top dead center there. So I've cranked it over to top dead center. It's definitely the compression stroke or the firing stroke.
it's lining up with number 1 on the Dizzy, so I think I'm pretty right. So we'll lock that back down. There is one other thing I can try. I haven't done the ground for the rev limiter. So there's a little wire that comes off and they say it's the grounding wire for the rev limiter. And I'm like, well, I don't really need the grounding wire for the rev limiter right this second because we're not going to be running it up to the limiter. But maybe it needs it to run. I don't know. Anyway, we'll lock down the Dizzy cap, hook up ground to that rev limiter wire and see if she starts then. So I'll put the earth wire on our RPM limiter wire, our limiter earth. Let's see if it did anything. Okay. That was odd. So we've come up with a theory. Actually, Matt came up with a theory, and that is that our keyed 12 volt, which powers up the ignition box, so it doesn't have 12 volts running to it all the time. Our keyed 12 volt was actually not 12 volt when you had the ignition on, because it tried to start when we flicked the ignition off. So we went and tested that and found out it was true. It dropping to like 1 volt when we hit the ignition. So now we've got it running to 12 volt permanently at the moment, but we will find a key 12 volt source in a sec, but let's test that theory. We'll hit the key now and see what it does. So it's trying to run. Needs some pedal. There we go. I just realised I haven't put that spark plug back in there, so compression gauge is copper and hammering. A poor compression gauge. Yeah, it's got all the compression. All right. So we'll put that spark plug back in there, but it runs. We have fixed that. So I guess the next bit is put the spark plug in, spark plug wire, do the timing, put some more trans fluid in it, see how the converter works. Yeah, but it runs. It's the simple things that'll get you. Runs. Right, so Dad's Ute runs for the first time in what feels like forever. It's been a while. So she runs. I've topped up the transmission fluid. Obviously it was dead empty because, all the trans work we did, fresh converter, all that. So it's just taken 8 litres of trans fluid. So, yeah, full of trans fluid. We've run it through the gears, make sure it's got fluid everywhere. I guess now we test it. Test what the converter stall speed is and test that it gets all the gears and how it just generally drives. So we'll take it for a short run up the road and see how she feels. All right, so this is the first time I've driven Dad's Ute in over 2 months apparently. So let's see how it all goes. I'll make sure we get all the gears first. Gears work. There we go, top gear, beautiful. Well, that's good news. The gearbox works. It's always fun, when you pull it apart. Make sure it kicks down. Yep, does that. Okay, converter test. So let's bring it up. $3,000. Okay. Converter works. Rockers are a little bit noisy all of a sudden though, so I'll have to check that. But converter definitely works, which is a good thing. Rockers sound a little bit loud all of a sudden, so I'll have to check that. However, car runs, auto works, converter works, so we got at least $3,000 out of it, so beautiful. And it just smoked the street out, so you didn't see that. But yeah, I call that a win. We'll find out what's going on with the rocker gear. I don't think it's anything too drastic, or I hope not. And we'll take it out the track. But you'll see all that on a future episode of Carnage. Wait, we have worked out what the problem is. Yeah, so for those that are curious about what the noise was at the end of the video, well, we were curious too. And I pulled the rocker cover off quickly and discovered one of the push rods had jumped out of the adjusting cup. And the reason it jumped out of it, well, there's the adjusting cup right there. You can see it broke the edge of the cup and it has jumped out, and therefore it was not running correctly. You can buy these, they're about 20 bucks, and I've even worked out why it broke it. It had the wrong push rod in there. So you can see that's the correct style of push rod. Straight at that end goes into the hydraulic lifter. That end goes to the rocker. You can see the little undercut. So when the rocker rocks, it doesn't hit the push rod. Well, that push rod has no undercut on either end. I did notice this push rod, and there was only one of them. I did notice this push rod when I did the valve springs. And I was concerned at the time, but then I also looked at it and went, well, this thing's just done 4,000 Ks in the engine, so it can't be too big of a problem. So I'll leave it for the moment and just replace it at a later time. One trip around the block, boom. Cars, why? So anyway, I'm gonna have to go down, buy the correct push rod. Why I've got 15 like this and one like this, I don't know. But it seems to be the case. And this is the one that broke the adjuster and jumped out. Anyway, so it's not a big problem, but enough to be annoying. So we'll fix that, get Dad's ute running again, take it to the track, and let's go run some numbers, because this thing, she rips off the line now. So yeah, good job TCE, done an awesome converter. Anyway, we will catch you next time.